So what do we do when something bad has happened to us and society, our culture, how we live, our perspective, people's thoughts could have saved it from happening? And I want to talk about this because it's super important. It's something that everybody in Western culture is really suffering from, if I want to say it. And I want to bring up a story because I'm writing a book, and one of the pivotal moments of my life was my first girlfriend getting kidnapped and tortured and assaulted and everything you could imagine happening to her. And it could have been prevented. And there was a lot to blame. And I just want to talk about that process. And just really quickly, this all came from Instagram on one of the little story things that you have and you ask questions. And my friend Jessica, who is an amazing person, commented about it without saying too much, but a very good friend of mine and helped me through a lot of things in my life. She suffered an amazing tragedy. I'll leave the story for somebody else to tell. But if that is one thing that we need to understand while going through a tough time, and to my audience out there, if you are a divorced man, if you're suffering from addiction, if you're a man who's been just destroyed by the court system, or if you have some sort of issues with mental health holding you back and you want to blame women, society, culture, feminism, the manosphere, the Republicans, the Democrats, Trump, Biden, whoever, I'm going to tell you right now, the story to healing your pain travels a completely different path than that one. And although you may start at looking at those different causes and whatnot, you need to get past that in order to get good with yourself. So that's what we're talking about here. I'm in Colombia, and man, I love it. I love it. I love it. Whew, let's get to this video. Welcome, everybody. Steve Mayeda here, and I've been a men's coach for 15 years, working with men all around the world on dating, sex, relationships, trauma, addiction, you name it, all things that I have sadly too much experience with. And maybe that's not so sad. But I want to get into this because this is a part of American culture or Western culture that we see as something that is good, and that is to blame a whole cause or grouping of people. We see it in men's development or the manosphere or men's whatever with blaming feminism. We see it in feminism blaming men and toxicity and toxic masculinity. And these are real problems. And I just want to make that clear that these problems are things in our lives that need to be solved. But in order to solve them, we need to heal ourselves first. So if there's one thing to this entire video that I'm trying to make clear for you guys, is that that is it. That if we want to solve our social problems and we have not solved our own internal problems first, or are not heavily on that road, and I mean heavily on that road, and that's what we're going to talk about, then we will pollute that and not solve the problems and just create social unrest, which is kind of where we're at now. So here is a checklist of my life. Number one, I have been sexually assaulted. I am a victim, if I even want to call it that, of major abuse in my life. Like I said, my first girlfriend was kidnapped and there was all this brutality to it. You can figure out what happened there, but it was really horrible. I stayed with her during that. I have PTSD from that. That was when I was 18 years old, and I probably have PTSD from before that. I lived as a drug addict for 10 years, a lot of that on the streets, in that I was sexually assaulted myself. I also got the shit beat out of me, all these different things. Then we move into life where I get a little bit more established. When I was 28 years old, I became a father. Started to attempt to turn my life around, but that didn't happen until I was 30, and by then I had 2 kids and a whole bunch of chaos. I was horrible in so many ways. But somehow in all of that, I went from being somebody who stole things for a living and played music on the streets to a professional pickup artist. What the hell is that? I mean, we want to talk about like, what the hell is going on with society, or like what is wrong with Steve Mayeda? Man, me at 28 years old to 30, there was a period of grace where I found something I was very good at and very, very good at that moved into a career, but maybe I shouldn't have been. And at that time, man, there was some good stuff. Man, some of my best times with my clients, and it's moved on to so much more, really came from that time. A very, very moving period in my life. And one of the reasons why I was so good at working and coaching with others was because I was in and out of recovery from the age of 14 to 30. When I was 30, I finally got clean. And I don't want to make this about like, oh, I'm clean and congratulate me. No, man, I had to do it or I was going to die. And so many of my friends are dead. I've seen people die. It's fucking horrible. I've had some of my closest friends, people I care about very much, be killed, kill themselves, or overdose, and mainly either kill themselves or overdose. goes. That's usually how it goes. What else? Then I went through a major custody battle with my 2 kids. I got accused of abusing my kids, went through a criminal trial. Actually, we didn't go to trial, but I went through the criminal justice system. I took a plea. It was horrible. Eventually, I got absolved from that in a later case, yada, yada, yada. But that sucks. And I didn't get to see my kids for 5 years. Okay, so I am editing this guy, and I came to the realization that there's something really important. I keep having audio problems too, so I'm sorry. But the point of this is that on this checklist, and let me go to the checklist, I have every excuse to be a victim, and I am a victim in those cases. But what helped me and what's going to help society most is me healing my pain, meaning that my life as a coach and my life as working with others is something that is beneficial, and I hope helps people, but I'm not healing my pain to solve society's problems. If that helps, that's good, and society does have problems that need to be solved. But that is there for me to solve. And the best thing I can add to society is that, and not me trying to fix society and mask my pain. And that is a huge thing that all of us in the Western world fall into. So, being a victim of sexual assault, being a victim of child abuse, having your first girlfriend be kidnapped and raped, and then have that whole thing be screwed up by the cops, which you'll hear about here in a second, PTSD, drug addiction, being falsely accused of child abuse, having my kids being taken away and going to jail, then later being absolved of it, and probably a ton of other stuff. Man, let me tell you, I have a reason to bitch and complain, and society was the problem of many of those things. But my solution and the best thing for society is never bringing my damaged self, my lack of forgiveness, my lack of acceptance, my lack of working through that pain and having it take me to a good place, into a social movement. And that's what I see people doing. And there will never be a solution. And that is the disease of Western culture, and especially in the United States right now. Let's get back to the rest of this video. According to the manosphere or the red pill or any of these different things, 1, I am a male. And so because of that, society helped make me a drug addict. I've also attempted suicide. I left that one out, but when you're on the streets, it's kind of like the thing to do. Like, why would you want to live if this is your life? And that might be hard for you to articulate or understand, but there's being depressed and wanting to kill yourself, and there's wanting to get out of pain and wanting to kill yourself, and I've had both. So according to the manosphere, society gave that to me. Now the next thing is the court systems. I got screwed when I was 33 or something like that. And that was terrible. That was a horrible, horrible experience, and a lot of it was unfair. But because of society and the courts, I was victimized, and now my sons didn't see me for 5 years, and they're screwed, and I'm screwed, and we're all screwed because I can blame the American court system. 3, I have had struggles in my life because of the pressures of man, and so that made me a drug addict and do all these, I don't know, but there's, basically what I'm getting to is I have had a lot of bad things in my life where there was a lot of victimhood. And actually there's one last thing that I want to talk about, which is really crazy. So when my ex-girlfriend, my first girlfriend, was kidnapped, the police screwed that up completely. And actually at the same time, when she was getting sexually assaulted and brutalized and tortured in the first 30 seconds to 5 minutes, maybe, man, I forget, there's so much into it, but in the first part of it all, when it could have been stopped and prevented, 100 yards away, a police officer was harassing me 100 yards away. Like you could run and sprint that in 15 seconds, maybe 10 if you're really fast. But literally 100 yards away from her being attacked, a cop was harassing me. The alarms of the place that she was at, being robbed and attacked at, were going off. A car peeled out. The police officer decided to harass me because maybe I was a man, by the manosphere, but harassed me because I was 18 years old and I was smoking a cigarette, and he wanted to make sure I was 18. And he spent like 5 minutes searching me and my friend. It was really terrible. And what's interesting about that is in the whole process of that, it may be because I'm a man or maybe because of whatever things I want to reach at for victimhood, in the investigation, they always think it's like the boyfriend who did it. So they thought it was me, but because that cop was harassing me and admitted to it, well, he didn't call it harassment, he called it doing his job, letting somebody 100 yards away be brutally attacked while alarms and every single signal could be going off that would say that something was wrong happening, he was with me. So, man, let me just say, I would much rather be considered a suspect and go through that process, which I did anyway, and that was pretty horrible. than to have the next 5 hours of torture that my ex-girlfriend had. In that investigation also, the police allowed the co-worker to come on afterwards, ruining all the evidence. It turns out later on in the investigation of the crime, because 16 years later they didn't catch him, he was an accomplice in it and in on some of the attack. Man, the cops screwed everything up. They messed everything up, and they let a 17-year-old minor have to go through a lifetime of trauma that I was with her on, and there was trauma that I went through in that. They let that happen without any justice for 16 years. And let me tell you what it is like going through what happened in that. And there's so much of that story that is screwed up, but having to eat that for days, weeks, months, and sit there next to her every day as I did, and have the police, one, blame me and interrogate the shit out of both of us, which was crazy, but I guess that's common, and not have any suspects, not have any arrests. I saw the people. She clearly saw the people. We saw their car. She saw them for 5 hours and have no arrests happen and them mess up all the evidence. You want to know what blame is like? Then I had it. And one of the things that I got from that early on, and I was in recovery at the time, and ended up relapsing like a year or two later, is that you try and live through acceptance and forgiveness. And even if you can't make sense of that, which at the time I couldn't, you force yourself to do it. And that was a big thing. Now, the other thing in that, which also saved my ass, is about a couple months after that, I forget actually the timeline, a friend of mine in recovery, a couple, the girl was also raped by somebody. And in that whole process, my friend, the male, reached out to me and said, hey man, this dude who we all know raped my chick. And then they went to go kill that guy, and the guy ended up killing them in self-defense. So the rapist actually didn't get caught for that rape, or maybe he did, I don't know, whatever. But he was also trying to be murdered or killed by people, and in self-defense, the rapist, or the alleged rapist, ended up killing one of the guys. Not my friend, but one of his friends that went to go kill him. That was a cold slap in the face of reality not to do the same, because believe it, because as you can imagine, when you're sitting there with no justice by the police, you want to take justice into your own hands. This happened when I was 18 years old, and is still today one of my greatest teachers of life, because it forced me to wait. See, when it comes down to things like the manosphere, when it comes down to things like men's rights, when it comes down to things like what feminism is talking about, these are real problems. Like, it was a real problem that my girlfriend was kidnapped and tortured for 5 hours. And it was a real problem that the police screwed up massively the investigation. It was a real problem that people did this. It was a real problem, all the STDs we got. It was a real problem, all the trauma we got. And it's a real problem to this day if I have flashbacks associated with that. It's also a problem when people tell me, especially close to me, say that PTSD doesn't exist and yada yada. Those are all problems. But guess what the solution is? The solution is not for me to blame people. The solution isn't to bring awareness through force and say that I'm victimized as a man or a woman, and I'm going to stand in front of you and I don't care because I've been hurt, and I'm going to force you, society, to listen who doesn't know what's going on. That is the worst thing to do. Also, when I hear the manosphere, it's like, look, this happened to me. I went to court. I got a raw deal. I didn't get to see my kids for 5 years. I had to do probation for 4 years. I had to pay all this money. And you know what? It could have been way worse, and I see men get way worse than that. But you complaining and getting angry and going online does not solve your problem. And when we get into that, your family needs you. What my kids needed from me in that 5 years to come back to was stability, not an angry man who was fighting for the rights for whatever because fatherhood was so important, because my pain echoed it. And see, this is an interesting place, because I could and do work with men who have these problems. And so what did I do with my pain? I went through personally to solve that pain. I went personally into myself, which means I went to therapy. I did a lot of recovery stuff. Man, let me tell you, in that time of when that all happened, when I was 18 years old, recovery saved my life. And I didn't end up relapsing until I think I was 20. So there were 2 years where it was amazing, man. I can't tell you the amount of inner work that I did during that time. And then also in tandem with that, therapy, in tandem with that, attempts at different forms of spirituality. And I cannot reiterate enough, I had a reason to be angry, and you can make sense of that. When it comes down to men's rights, man, let me tell you, in 2012, when all of that happened with my kids, that was terrible. And going through court and all that sort of stuff, and I had support from now my ex-wife in that situation, which was great. She would go to court with me all the time with it and really helped me mentally out with that so much, but not being able to see your kids for 5 years and the hearing of that, the understanding of that, that is the most painful point of my life, hands down. The court system did screw up, in my opinion, with that. The court system went after me in a way that was terrible. The mental illness associated from that all around it was screwed up. But guess what? What saved me in that time? And thank God once again for recovery. At that time, I had rejoined recovery and had 4 years clean, I think, something around then. And man, it saved my butt. Things like legitimate therapy, things like working on myself, things like taking my anger and be able to navigate through it. Things like having a healthy group and community around me to go through my rage and pain through what was happening of things that did not make sense in my life whatsoever. And instead of attacking something and yelling at people, which I did that, I'm sure I did that a little bit, but not a lot, were things that were short-lived, and I learned to process through them. See, we talk about living a great life all the time. Like everybody talks about that. It's like, oh my God, I'm gonna live the best life that I can and so on. And I care about it. I'm gonna post all these pictures of whatever on Instagram and everybody's gonna think I live the best life. But see, this is part of the problem. We're living our life for other people and not for ourselves. And how that moves into it is when I live my life for other people, I have to, when I look for the solution of problems, look outside of myself. Because I'm defined by other people, I'm gonna blame other people. Man, this is the mental disorder of Western culture right now, is that we do not look at ourselves for responsibility. And then when somebody comes along like Jocko Willink saying like, own your life, which is freaking great, and he's freaking great, we distort it and think that owning our life is going in front of the Capitol building and talking about whatever rights that we have. And that could be part of it, man. You should do that. That, if you're an American, you have your right to do that, and I want you to do that. But clean yourself first. Get your shit together. And if you do not, you will fail, and everything will fail, and you'll bring everything down with it. I am involved of the cause of Steve Mayeda to help men live better lives, to do what I have done, kicking and screaming and very hard and highly traumatic for myself. I am doing that, but I do not do the cause of something that I do not understand. I do not do the cause of something that I understand but carry pain with. And how can I get that through your head? The only way I know how to do it is make videos like this, invite you to my communities, which work. If you're a man that's going through this and you want help, look, help is here. This is what I do. It's not bullshit. I have a group of 200 men right now that has been active for over 12 years. That's how long my online systems have been here, that are communities of men who have proven to work through this. So if you're confused about life, if you've dealt with trauma, if you're going through a divorce, if you're going through addiction and you don't know how to solve it, click the links down below. I would recommend to sign up for the Rising Man or Men's Development Excellence and get your life together and get activated in that. Because if there's one thing that I know is if you can work in a community and you're willing to work with yourself and get honest with yourself, my programs work. And they don't just kind of work. Your life gets much better through fellowship, through brotherhood, and through excellence. All right. Kind of a tough topic, but I think we're good with that one.